When it comes to our stewardship Sundays, Pastor Laura and I usually decide to break away from the prescribed lectionary texts for the day and pick passages that we think will fit the message that we're trying to get across. Whether that's a specific point about stewardship or what it means to be good stewards, or in an attempt to connect to the overarching theme that's been selected. This year's theme being indefatigable hope. And I sincerely hope that you appreciated the sheer number of times that we were able to squeeze the word indefatigable into the stewardship letter that we sent out last week. This year, however, Pastor Laura and I decided not to change the assigned texts because we actually thought that both were surprisingly workable when it came to talking about stewardship. I mean, really, what good stewardship sermon doesn't include murder, mayhem, and cornerstones falling on top of people like pianos falling out of the sky in an old-timey cartoon, right? Our gospel story for today is commonly referred to as the parable of the wicked tenants. There's this landowner who builds a lovely vineyard, puts a little fence around it, builds a wine press and a watchtower, and then he leases it to tenants before departing to attend to, I don't know what, other business. We aren't told the specifics of this lease agreement, but it would appear that at least a portion of the harvest was promised to the landowner because, come harvest time, he sent some of his servants to collect his share. But the tenants were having none of that. Can't you just hear them whispering to themselves? Who does this guy think he is? Trying to waltz in here and take money out of our pockets without doing a lick of work? Taking produce that we shed blood, sweat, and tears to grow, he can take it from our cold, dead hands. Now, obviously, I'm dramatizing the story a little bit here, but I don't think that I'm too far from the truth, given the fact that the tenants beat, kill, and stone not one but two separate groups of servants that were sent by the landowner before finally doing the same thing to the landowner's son, thinking with some bizarro land logic that if they kill the son, they would somehow be entitled to his inheritance, as if this landowner has a clause in his will that states that anyone who brutally murders his son automatically becomes his heir. All in all, this is quite the parable that Jesus puts before the chief priests and the Pharisees. He asks them what they think that the landowner should do in this situation, and they answer, not knowing that the story is really about them. They say that those wretched tenants should be put to a miserable death, and that the vineyard should be leased to new people who will look after it properly. Like I said, classic stewardship text, right? Well, if you put aside the murder and mayhem and threats of violence and begin to unpack this parable, it actually does end up being a pretty good stewardship story. The landowner represents God, and the vineyard is meant to be all of creation. God creates all that is, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, beautiful mountains and valleys, rivers and lakes, the oceans that stretch for as far as the eye can see. And God blessed this world with natural resources that overflow with abundance. God created all that is and entrusted it to the care of humanity, charged us with being stewards, caretakers, protectors of this incredible world. But after a while, we got comfortable in our vineyard, our world. We began to lose sight of that relationship, that original agreement to be stewards, not owners. So God sent servants to remind us, prophets that have come throughout the ages to speak truth, to remind us of the covenant that was made with that landowner, with God, to remind us that we don't own the vineyard, but have merely been entrusted with its care. But we liked the security and the power that came with our perceived ownership. So we rejected those prophets. We blocked up our ears to their words. We cast them out, stoned, and killed them until finally God sent God's own Son, Jesus, into the world. thinking surely that he would be able to make us see reason. Surely God's own Son would be able to remind us of this original agreement that we entered into. But when his words cut a little too close, when his teachings strayed just a little too far from the norms and the values of the society that we had created, when he threatened to upset the systems of power and control that we had so carefully put in place, well, that was just too much. So we put him to death on a cross. Luckily for us, we don't have a God who is as vindictive as the chief priests and the Pharisees thought that the landowner in the story should be. Luckily for us, we have a God who would use that brutal death to utterly transform the world, to remind us what true power looks like, to once and for all defeat the powers of sin and evil and set us free to live as God intended. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The story for today is a reminder that nothing that we have is truly ours, that we can never truly own anything, but rather everything that we have has been entrusted into our care by God, which is a really hard concept for us to wrap our heads around. Because as people, we love owning stuff. Am I right? There's this sense of power, control, security, safety even, that comes with having things. I play softball in a rec league down in UTC where Alyssa and I live. I'm part of a team of people who all signed up as free agents. And instead of adding us here and there to existing teams, they just decided to put us all together onto one team. The first season was a little rough, and we had to forfeit quite a few games because we didn't have enough people show up to the games. But this season has been a lot better. We got some new, more consistent players added to the team, and we are actually currently tied for first place at 3-0. Now, one of those new players has this awesome purple bat. I commented on it before the first game because purple is one of my favorite colors, and she graciously said that I could give it a try if I wanted to. That game I went 3 for 3 with 2 singles and a home run in the bottom of the last inning that tied the game. We would later go on to score the winning run about 30 seconds before the field lights shut off in what I can only assume will be made into a movie at some point, I'm sure. The next game, I went 3 for 4 with a home run, a triple, and a single. I was just a double shy of the cycle. Purple bat, as we've started affectionately calling it, is a DeMarini USA softball certified 34-inch, 25-ounce stacked double wall barrel construction with a composite handle and an end-loaded 13-inch barrel. Why do I know all those details? Because right after that first game, I bombarded her with questions about which bat it was, how much it cost, where I could buy it. Because instead of just being thankful that I had a teammate that had this awesome bat that she was letting me use, my mind immediately went to a theology of scarcity. What if she doesn't show up one week? What if she decides that she doesn't want other people using it anymore? The only way to prevent that from happening would be for me to own, possess, control the bat for myself. I wasn't happy with being able to just borrow it. Just like the tenants in our story for today weren't happy with just being entrusted with the care and the oversight of the vineyard. They wanted to own, possess, control it for themselves. Now, I will say that she was sadly sick for our game this past Wednesday, and in that game, I only went 1 for 2 with a single, so I may still ask for the bat as like a birthday/Christmas present from my parents, which I know isn't really in keeping with the message Jesus is trying to get across, but hey, Martin Luther did say if you're going to sin boldly, so there's that at least. But here we really start getting at the heart of what stewardship is about. That metaphor with the bat, it kind of falls apart at the end because God never misses a game. And we can count unconditionally on God to be there to provide for and take care of us. so that we can begin to let go of our need to own, possess, and control, and instead opt for a posture of trust and gratitude. This story also reminds us that stewardship isn't about looking at our hard-earned money or our time and talents, since we often talk here at Bethlehem about how stewardship involves much more than just money. But it isn't about taking something that is ours, something that we own, possess, and control, and figuring out how much we can do without, and then magnanimously giving it to God. Now, stewardship is about recognizing that what we give back to God is actually already God's in the first place, and has simply been entrusted into our care for the time being. Too often, we act like those wicked tenants, and we think that our hard work means that we have earned the right to own whatever it is that we have. We fancy ourselves to be entirely self-made, deserving of the things that are in our possession, forgetting that God gave us everything to help get us where we are today. All of the things that God gave us, including any money, resources, or opportunities that we might have simply because of our family of origin. It includes things like our intellect, our passion, our work ethic, and our determination. And heck, even the capacity to grow and develop those skill sets and characteristics was given to us by God. Stewardship is meant to be a reordering of our priorities, a recalibrating of how we see the world, a way to move us from a mindset of tight-fisted ownership, the same mindset that led those tenants to beat, kill, and stone any and all who threatened their perceived ownership of the vineyard, to move us away from that mindset and into a posture of gratitude, of giving thanks to God for the blessings that we have been given. And one of the greatest blessings in our lives is the church, both as an institution and our own church in particular, Bethlehem Lutheran Church here in Encinitas, California. A few months ago, a member of the congregation sent Pastor Laura and myself a series of articles that were written by Jessica Gross of the New York Times. The series was aimed at understanding the decline of organized religion and the rise of the group that is commonly referred to as nuns, spelled N-O-N-E-S, not to be confused with the N-U-N nuns of Catholic fame. Now, these are people who select none when responding to surveys with questions regarding what their religious affiliation is. In one of the articles, Gross said the following: "I asked every sociologist I interviewed whether communities created around secular activities outside of houses of worship could give the same level of wraparound support that churches, temples, and mosques are able to offer. Nearly across the board, the answer was no." Phil Zuckerman, a professor of sociology and secular studies at Pitzer College, put it this way: "I can go play soccer on a Sunday morning and hang out with people from different races and different class backgrounds, and we can bond, but I'm not doing that with my grandparents and my grandchildren. A soccer team can't provide spiritual solace in the face of death. It probably doesn't have a weekly charitable call, and there's no sense of connection to a heritage that goes back generations. You can get bits and pieces of these disparate qualities elsewhere," he said, "but besides religious organizations, there is no one-stop shop." And it's true. When it works the way that it's supposed to, and historically that hasn't always been the case, but when it does, the church provides people with so many wonderful things. The church is a place where all are welcome, where all can belong, a place where we can come to hear a word of grace, of forgiveness, to be told that you are loved, wholly and unconditionally beyond your wildest dreams. It's a place where we can come into contact with people who might be in an entirely different phase of life from us. And we have the opportunity to learn from each other, gain and share wisdom and insight. It's a place where intergenerational wisdom can be exchanged, both from old to young as well as from young to old. It's a place where we as a people can have our hearts set ablaze with love for our neighbor that leads us out into the world to seek justice, work for peace, and stand up to evil in whatever form it might take. And the church provides us with community and everything that that word entails. A group of wonderfully imperfect people that we love and learn from and maybe even disagree with at times, but are united with through a common faith and are bolstered by the indefatigable hope that that faith provides. Look at that, I even worked it into the sermon. And Bethlehem is absolutely a place where all of those amazing things can and do happen. And they happen in part because of the support of people who love it, people like you, people who choose to lay whatever resources they might have, be they financial or social or intellectual or physical, to take whatever God has given you, gifted you, blessed you with, and put it to work for the sake of the world, to recognize those things for what they are, gifts, and to handle them as such, not with close-fisted, jealous control, but with open, trusting, gracious hands that are lifted up in praise to the one from whom all blessings flow. Our hymn of the day for today is All Are Welcome. And as we sing it, I want you to really pay attention to the words, to the vision of community that it paints, to the indefatigable hope and promise that reside within those words. Because the idea of being stewards of the entire world can feel a little overwhelming. But the idea of being stewards of this place, of doing what we can to make this a place that reflects the words of that song, that's entirely doable with your help and with the help of God. Amen.